And so in playing the part of, I'll be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, you talked about they need to be ready, they need to have 5 years outside, they need to be ready, they need to be motivated. Jay, you've got a plethora of family members that, potentially are at bay, and your brother, you said, has brought his son in recently, right? Marketability. I guess, how important are job descriptions? Tom's already chagrining here. How important are job descriptions in both potentially your family members, succession-wise, as well as do you have job descriptions for ownership of what everybody does and why they do what they do? Jay, you want to start with that one?
Again, we're a work in process, so we don't really. I mean, we're building all that. I agree. Ideally, you do want job descriptions, but with the things how they change, we're still. One thing about my dad, he's an entrepreneur, and we try to keep that entrepreneurial spirit. Hence, that's why we're going after this IPR pursuit. And people think we're crazy for doing it, but that's just in our DNA. So I really struggle with that because in our business being so dynamic and changing all the time, and there's our particular industry is consolidating, and I'm sure it's similar with most industries, if not all. It's just very difficult to do that, but to the extent that we can, we try to do that. But I think over and above that, we're really trying to set expectations and communicate. And that's what we're doing now, but you can, it's ideally, yes, you want to do that to the extent you can.
Okay. Peter, do you guys have a plethora of job descriptions based on the levels of
now we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we always, to the point that we didn't have titles on our business cards to that point. So we were trying to find people with ability that could help us grow the business and create their own niches. So we were trying to create new markets, new opportunities. And so basically what happened is if you did a good job and had the desire to do it, then you'd sort of create your own position anyway. But now it's very, very different. It's much more controlled, heavy in job descriptions. As you get larger, it requires different structure to it. And I think it's just the state of your business, where you stand within your
Sure.
business. So right now we're so large, we have to have control. But it kind of takes the fun away with the Wild West kind of strategy to grow your business. So I miss that a little bit.
Yeah. Tom, job descriptions, it's got to be part of the playground, right?
Yeah, I hate them. It's one of those things that you say, if I never want to be in one of those meetings where people go, that's not in my job description. Right? I think we all philosophically, whether it's whatever generation you are, an entrepreneur,
Yes.
professional manager, you never want to hire somebody who wants to know, well, is that in my job description? So I hired somebody, fairly good 6-figure salary, and I put at the bottom of the job description, they asked for one, I put making coffee. And they looked at it and they said, I don't understand making coffee. And I said, you don't know how to make coffee? And they knew I'm obviously a little bit of a joke, but I said, you don't know how to do it? No, I know how, but why would you want me to make coffee for what you're paying me? I said, it's in everybody's job description to make coffee. I just want to make sure that when you leave the coffee pot empty, you realize that I'd like you to make more.
Yeah.
And the person really got it.
Yeah.
And it created a dialogue of communication of what I was looking for. And it ended up not being the right person for a variety of reasons, but it started to give me different avenues in order to create dialogue about what type of people we want. And I think in certain companies and certain roles, you need that. And in other roles where we use the expression, we like people who think big but act small. And I think it's finding out what your taglines are in order to get people to operate within their job. One last thing is always, if you do what's in your job description, you keep your job. If you do what's beyond your job description, you get promoted and you get bonused. And I firmly believe that with family members or non-family members. That's where distributions and bonuses and all the other things come out.
Alan, job descriptions?
So two reactions. One, yes on job descriptions, and I think there's two parts to them. And we're sort of fanatical about job descriptions, sort of in that middle management role and below. And I think the best job description that we have for the most senior people is really their compensation plan, because it's very specific in terms of what their responsibilities are. And most of the compensation plans have three, might be two, might be four, but typically three areas in which you are evaluated in terms of being able to earn more than your salary. So that's where, to me, sort of job description and compensation sort of come together.
It's more of a metric.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
a
We have
metric,
three,
right?
Three metrics, and they're all line of sight. I mean, the whole point is not to have somebody that's three levels, sort of 3 times removed from profit, responsible for profit. Instead, what line of sight items can they be responsible for, and what can we use as a metric that's relevant to them and that they actually have control over. So really, it's sort of aligning the job description and the compensation plan, to me, are really important. And that's the other, I said transparency before. The other word that I say a ton is alignment. And having compensation sort of aligned, or having a job description aligned with what you're actually asking the person to do. I mean, those things are really important. Having a job description on a piece of paper that has nothing to do with what they're really doing during the day is not helpful. So having all that stuff aligned, I think, is really important.
Great. And so, Tom, back to you. Since you started your business, how often did you have to change the way you paid your executive team? Since you're very market-driven relative to marketability, and I think your industry, just like probably the lion's share of the people here, we've had peaks and valleys, right, of people, potentially. I guess, how do you continue to reinvent that within your own executive team, and I guess, how do you see it for your clients?
Well, it's been, as an entrepreneurial company, started 15 years ago, we've grown in scope. So we didn't have as big of an executive team when we were 10 or 12 million dollars as we do when we're 40 or 45 million dollars in revenue, and we've continued to grow every year, fortunately. And so when I look at it, one thing I've done, and it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, it's just factual, is I have turned over my executive team. And I think that's one mistake, one thing I've done that a lot of firms don't do, is they always change the staff and they don't change the executive team, and they're either afraid to change executive team members, or they move around that one person who's been loyal to them and they give them 20 different jobs in the company trying to find a place for them because they've been good, right? I mean, every company that's been around for over 10 or 15 years has this person. It's like, oh, we can't do that. We got to put this guy over there. And with my executive team, I always view it as when I started the company, we got a little bit of success. In our second year, we did about $3 million in sales. And I hired a couple salespeople, and I stopped selling aggressively all the time personally. And then we hit the dot-com bubble bursting, and I thought, you know what, I'm never going to let go that quickly because these guys weren't what I thought they were going to be. And now when I hire executives to come on board, we call it corporate grandparenting, which a lot of people call skip-level management. And we just make sure that myself as well as my executive team have relationships 2 levels down. And we want to make sure that we continually do that. And the analogy I always give is almost like babysitters. And not that managers should be babysitters,
Right.
but in fact, it just becomes part of the job. And if you don't ask your kid, if you ask your kid, oh, how was the babysitter? And they say, they hit me, you would want to talk to the babysitter and see if the kid's lying and figure it out, and you wouldn't want that babysitter back. So you hire a manager that you're trusting with your company, which is a child, and you're saying, I'm never going to check with the children and ask how the babysitter's doing. Now, on the flip side, you have to realize that kids can be manipulative. And when they say the babysitter's really mean, and you find out it was because they made them eat their vegetables at dinner, that's actually a good thing.
Yeah.
So I think that executive compensation and management, again, very similar to what Alan said, it's got to align with what the responsibilities are. And you need to make sure that you set that out.
So, Jay, there's how do you avoid the family factor? We talk about, people gossiping, people talking about, who's related to whom, otherwise known as nepotism within family-owned businesses. I guess, how do you, from a compensation perspective, alleviate that family factor as part of the conversation with your key employees?
Well, I basically think it's really going to, we have to earn our keep, so to speak. I think, like I was saying before, I think we've reached a level of everybody's pretty comfortable that we're bringing value in our certain areas. We're always trying to sell and grow the business, and fortunately, we've been doing that. So I would say that a lot of our process is developing leadership, and we're talking about our executive team. We've had 2 or 3 iterations in the last 4 or 5 years with this kind of this team-based, empowered employee
Myers-Briggs.
workforce. And yeah, it's a lot of
Myers-Briggs.
team building and personality profiles. And so a lot of what we're struggling with is the structure. And we worked a lot on that. And it, whether it's the senior leadership team or the middle leadership, we're just trying to develop that. And, frankly, you talk about alignment, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is align our compensation, trying to come up with measurements, key targets, and kind of pay, like I was saying, if it's sales, it's easy, but when you're talking management or, some of the different, whether it's accounting, customer service, some of the sales roles, technical sales roles, it's very difficult to quantify that. So we're developing a skills matrix where, we're trying to quantify what type of skills, what kind of value you're bringing. And
So regardless of bloodline, right? I mean, you're focused on the company and
Yeah,
the strategic
yeah, right.
plan of the company. And
Exactly.
everybody and how they play in that playground of the company.
yeah, I think we're pretty well settled with the brothers. Now it's the next generation.
Sure.
We're worried about that. Now it's more figuring out how we're going to, it's all about being market driven, doing what's best for the company and aligning with our strategy, basically.
Pete, how did you guys handle that potential ick factor relative to having, the family members in the business? Would be on the before side of the transaction, and then the rest of any key employees, I guess. Were there any issues there with respect to, people thinking that there was beneficial interests because you were a family member versus you just coming on board? I mean, you came in on market driven, right? And you came in because your dad asked you to, and you thought about it, you considered it. I guess when you were brought in prior to the transaction, was there any resistance from other folks? I mean, earning your keep, things like that.
Yeah, they test you right away, of course. So, but if you come in with experience or abilities, it shakes out really fast. The thing we struggled with formally being able to identify talent and abilities, and then be able to give them tools and work on succession planning and train them and give them transparency in terms of what their career paths might look like. So the things we started doing when I got involved with this group was we hired a consultant to help us map out succession planning. And it was all key employees, assuming owners in our company are key employees. It's the same thing. So we just took all this talent, didn't matter at all whether it's family or not, and we started to work on where do we have holes, where do we see people filling into. And I think that exercise was a really, really good thing. Now what we do is I think it's a GE process, but it's called 9-block planning. So we look at all key employees, and then you fill into blocks based on some different factors. And it's been very transparent because you get honest feedback. You can tell people right away, this is what we think this is what you're good at. This is what we think you would be good at, and this is what your career path might look like. And you have very frank, honest conversations, and it's awesome for openness of communication and keeping people that see futures for themselves.
And one thing you'll usually find yourself doing is saying, well, we can't do that because we have Steve. Right? And you're like, forget about Steve. How should it look?
Right.
And you'll do that 2 or 3 or 4 times when you're creating the org chart, and it's a great way to look at it.
And the other thing, maybe a little off the topic, but you're always forced, for whatever reason, to push somebody out of the organization, and you're always worried about what the ripple effect is. And the fact of the matter is the organization knew long before you knew that that should happen, and somehow, you will go on. And the first time we ever did it, I'll never forget it. I just thought there's no way we can have, I thought my dad was nuts and I was nuts, And together we were nuts, and it was the best thing we ever did. And from then on, I learned that there's nobody, including me, who is, untouchable. Everybody's touchable, everyone's accountable, everybody, has to play a role, and if they can't play that role, then we, if there isn't another role for that person that makes sense, and we don't want that person, we have a couple of those at the bottom sometimes that how do they wind up over here, and then they're over there, and they come back one day and they're over here. They probably should be gone. But certainly at a senior level, we try not to let that happen.
When there's two different things. One is creating a new position, that sounds like you're talking about, and the other is replacing somebody when you have turnover, either voluntary or involuntary. And I always think, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, is take a chance to look at that department, if not your entire company, but that department, and say, is now the time to redo and reorg what you have there? Don't just refill an accountant with an accountant. Maybe you need to reallocate responsibilities in different places. Everything, there's always what did Ram say? A good catastrophe shouldn't be wasted.
Right.
Right,
I
exactly.
believe in that when
Yeah.
it comes to.
There's a
to
reason
turmoil.
for this change, right?
Yeah.
There's a bigger reason.
No one ever looks back and says, you always think, I fired him too late. You never look back and say, oh, we should have kept that person.